It started like any other quiet morning. Birds chirping, coffee brewing, the usual hum of a world too busy to notice the sky. But by lunchtime, everything changed. Not with explosions or sirens, but with silence. A silence so deep it made people stop scrolling, stop talking, stop breathing for a second. Because up there, beyond the blue, something impossible had arrived. Deep space telescopes. Those giant eyes humanity built to stare into the void. Picked it up first. A cluster of objects moving fast, then slowing down way too quickly near Mars. Way too quickly for anything made of metal and fuel. Scientists double-checked their instruments. Military satellites swiveled to look. Even backyard astronomers with cheap lenses saw it. A swarm of shapes, dark and smooth, hanging in space like they owned it. There were over 200 of them, each one bigger than a city block. And they weren't broadcasting. No radio pings, no greetings, no threats, just watching. At first, panic spread like wildfire. News channels cut to emergency broadcasts. Governments went into lockdown mode. Parents pulled kids from school. But as hours turned into a full day, something strange happened. Nothing happened. The fleet didn't fire, didn't move closer, didn't even flicker a light. It just stayed there, silent and still, like a question mark hanging in the sky. People started calling them the Draconian Armada, not because anyone knew where they came from, but because they looked like something out of old myths. Sleek, angular, with curves that seemed to bend light around them. Some said they resembled dragons coiled in space. Others thought they looked like tombs. Either way, no one could explain how they got here. Their speed alone broke every rule of physics we knew. One moment they were light years away, or so the models guessed. The next they were practically in our backyard. Then, on the third night, they vanished. Not exploded. Not zoomed off. Just gone. 1 second, every telescope on Earth and in orbit had them locked in view. The next, blank space. People thought it was a glitch. A system error. But then, minutes later, new alerts blared from ground stations in Hawaii, Chile, and South Africa. The fleet was back. Only now it wasn't near Mars. It was right above Earth, hovering over the Pacific Ocean like it had always belonged there. That's when the real fear set in. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you sit very still and wonder if your whole understanding of reality is wrong. Because this wasn't a movie. This wasn't a drill. This was real life, and real life didn't have alien armadas parking over the ocean without saying a word. Governments scrambled. Emergency meetings happened in bunkers and secure video calls. The United Nations, usually slow and tangled in red tape, formed a special task force within hours. Scientists from every country shared data like never before. Even rival nations, countries that hadn't spoken in years, started swapping telescope feeds and radar logs. For the first time in human history, the whole planet was looking in the same direction, at the same thing, holding its breath together. But the aliens, assuming they were aliens, didn't care. They didn't respond to radio signals beamed in every language, including math and music. They ignored laser pulses, drone flybys, even a desperate message sent in whale song. Someone thought maybe they'd appreciate Earth's oldest voices. Nothing. The ships just floated there, dark and smooth, reflecting sunlight like obsidian mirrors. Down on the ground, life kept going, but it felt different. Kids drew pictures of the ships in school. Preachers called it the Rapture. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a secret military project gone rogue. But most people, they just stood outside at night staring up, wondering what it all meant. Was this the end? A test? A mistake? Or maybe an invitation? What made it even stranger was how calm the ship seemed. No weapons pointed at cities. No energy spikes that looked like charging beams. In fact, the only thing scientists could detect was a faint hum, so low it wasn't even sound, more like a vibration in the bones of anyone standing under them. Some people said it made them feel peaceful. Others said it gave them headaches. No one agreed on what it was, but everyone agreed on one thing. These ships weren't here to destroy. At least not yet. Then came the rumors. A fisherman off the coast of Japan swore he saw one of the ships open a panel and release a shimmering mist that vanished before it hit the water. A satellite technician in Norway claimed the fleet's formation shifted slightly every night, tracing patterns that matched ancient star maps. None of it could be proven, but it didn't matter. The mystery was growing faster than facts could keep up. And through it all, the world waited. Not for war, not for answers, just for something, anything to happen. 72 hours after they appeared over Earth, the fleet did something new. They began to move. Slowly, silently, they spread out across the planet. Not randomly. They drifted toward specific spots. Places far from cities, far from people. Deserts, jungles, frozen wastes. Deep ocean trenches. It was as if they'd studied Earth for a long time and knew exactly where to go without disturbing a single soul. No one knew why. No one knew what came next. But one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the scariest part? They still hadn't said a word. For 17 days, the world lived under a sky that wasn't quite its own anymore. The Draconian ships didn't attack. They didn't speak. They just stayed, hovering in perfect silence over 7 quiet corners of the planet. Like sentinels watching over something only they understood. At first, people expected chaos, riots, panic, governments collapsing. But instead, something quieter happened. People got used to it. Not in a happy way, but in the way humans always do. By folding the impossible into their daily lives. Kids played Armada tag in schoolyards. News anchors signed off with, "Still no word from the fleet," like it was weather. Farmers in the outback would glance up while fixing fences, just to make sure the ship above the desert hadn't moved. It hadn't, not once. But behind the calm surface, tension was building. Every government on Earth was on high alert. Military bases ran drills not for invasion, but for something else. No one knew what protocol to follow when the enemy doesn't act like an enemy. Scientists worked around the clock, trying to understand how the ship stayed in the air without engines, without exhaust, without even a whisper of energy leakage. The few readings they got made no sense. Gravity fields bending in ways Einstein never predicted. Materials that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. And a strange hum that pulsed in time with Earth's own magnetic rhythm. Then came the drones. After 2 weeks of silence, a joint mission, funded by several countries but operated quietly from a remote Pacific island, launched a small, unarmed drone toward the nearest ship, floating just above the ocean. It carried cameras, sensors, and a simple message loop: "We come in peace." The drone flew smoothly, broadcasting live footage back to labs across 3 continents. Millions watched online as it got closer, until it was just 50 meters from the ship's surface, and then nothing. The feed cut to static. Not interference, not a crash, just gone. One frame showed the smooth dark hull filling the screen. The next, black. No explosion, no debris, no signal bounce. It was as if the drone had been erased from existence, not destroyed. Erased. That moment changed everything. Fear returned, not the wild, screaming kind, but the cold, heavy kind that sits in your chest and won't leave. Because now it was clear, these ships weren't just strange. They were dangerous in a way no one could measure or predict. You couldn't fight what you couldn't touch. You couldn't talk to what wouldn't listen. And you couldn't run from something that could make your technology vanish with a thought. Religious movements surged overnight. Some saw the Armada as angels, others as demons. A few believed Earth had been chosen for a cosmic reset. Meanwhile, scientists argued in hushed tones about quantum shielding, pocket dimensions, or even the idea that the ships existed slightly out of sync with our timeline, like ghosts made of metal and starlight. But the most unsettling discovery came from deep space observatories. While everyone focused on the ships above Earth, astronomers noticed something chilling. The star system where the Draconian fleet likely came from, somewhere in the Draco constellation, had gone dark. Not dim, not quiet. Completely dark. No infrared glow from planets. No radio chatter. No signs of civilization at all. It was as if an entire star system had been switched off. That raised a terrifying question. If their home was gone, why were they here? Were they refugees? Survivors? Or had they brought whatever wiped out their world with them? Still, the ships did nothing. No weapons charged, no beams fired. They just hovered day after day as if waiting for something or someone to make the next move. Then on the 18th morning they moved. Not fast. Not violently. But with a slow, deliberate grace that sent chills down spines. All at once, every ship in the Armada began to descend, gently, like falling leaves. People rushed outside, phones in hand, hearts pounding. Was this it? The invasion? The end? But no. The ships didn't head for cities or power plants or military bases. They drifted lower and lower until they settled softly, silently onto the ground, or ocean floor in one case. In the Gobi Desert, one ship rested on cracked earth without kicking up a single grain of dust. In the Amazon, another landed in a clearing so perfectly it didn't crush a single tree. In Antarctica, one sat on ice that didn't melt beneath it, even though instruments later showed the hull was warm. It was as if they knew exactly where to land and how to do it without leaving a mark. Within hours, the world's top scientists, linguists, engineers, and military advisors were on the move. Under strict UN coordination, small teams were sent to each site. No weapons, no loud noises, just curiosity, caution, and a desperate hope for answers. The first team to reach a ship, somewhere in the Australian outback, approached slowly, wearing full environmental suits, recording everything. The ship towered over them, smooth and seamless, with no doors, no windows, no seams at all. They tried knocking, shouting, shining lights, nothing. Then one scientist placed a hand on the surface. It felt warm and slightly unalive. Not like metal, but like stone warmed by the sun, except it was night. They set up camp nearby, scanning, listening, waiting. Days passed. Still no response. Then on the third night, something odd happened. The ship seemed to flicker, just for a fraction of a second, like a mirage. One moment it was solid. The next it looked almost transparent, like you could see right through it. Cameras caught it, but only on certain sensors. Human eyes weren't sure. Was it real? Or just exhaustion playing tricks? Back at Mission Control, data poured in from all 7 sites. Every ship behaved the same. Silent, warm, occasionally phasing in and out of visibility. But when teams tried to enter, using drills, lasers, even gentle vibrations, the hull wouldn't budge. It wasn't just strong. It seemed to reject the idea of being touched, as if it existed on a different rulebook altogether. And then came the strangest part. When scientists tried to take samples of the air around the ships, the readings kept changing. Sometimes normal Earth atmosphere, sometimes filled with particles that didn't match anything in the periodic table, sometimes empty, like the air itself had been edited. By the end of the second week on the ground, one truth became undeniable. The ships weren't machines in the way humans understood machines. They were something else. Something that blurred the line between object and organism, between technology and nature. But the biggest mystery remained. Where was the crew? No bodies, no bones. No signs of life at all. Just empty vessels, perfectly preserved, sitting on Earth like offerings. And as the world watched, waiting for the next move, the ships did the one thing no one expected. They went completely dark all at once. Every light, every hum, every faint energy signature switched off. Not damaged, not broken, just off. Like someone had turned a key somewhere in the universe and said, "It's done." Now Earth wasn't just hosting an alien armada, it was guarding a tomb, and no one knew who or what was inside. When the ships went dark, it wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like watching a living thing fall asleep and never wake up. One moment, the air around them hummed with that strange, low vibration people could feel in their teeth. The next, silence. Total, absolute silence. No heat, no energy, no movement. Just massive, smooth shapes sitting on Earth like ancient stones left behind by a forgotten god. Teams on the ground didn't panic at first. They assumed it was a trick, a test, or maybe a power-down cycle. But hours turned into days and the ships stayed cold. Instruments showed nothing. Not even the faintest electromagnetic whisper. It was as if they'd become part of the planet itself. Just another hill, another rock, another mystery buried in plain sight. Then came the orders. Go inside. Not with force. Not with weapons, but with care, with hope. Scientists built special tools. Soft probes, non-invasive scanners, even acoustic mics that could pick up vibrations through solid surfaces. They tried everything. And finally, at one site in the Sahara, something gave way. Not a door opening, but a section of the hull. Softened. Like water turning to mist. One researcher stepped forward, heart pounding, and reached out. His gloved hand passed through the surface as if it weren't there. He walked in. What he found inside changed everything. And explained nothing. The interior wasn't filled with control panels or alien machinery. No chairs, no screens, no signs of daily life. Just vast open chambers lined with walls that looked like polished crystal. glowing faintly from within. The light wasn't electric. It pulsed, slow and steady like a heartbeat. The air smelled clean like rain on hot stone, but carried no oxygen readings. Yet the team could breathe just fine. Their suits registered normal air, but their lungs felt lighter, calmer. They moved deeper, cameras rolling, voices hushed. Every step echoed strangely, as if the sound bounced not just off walls but off time itself. In one chamber they found strange symbols etched into the floor, not carved but grown like veins in marble. They shifted slightly when stared at too long, rearranging into patterns that made your eyes water. No one could read them, not even AI trained on every known language on Earth. But the most haunting thing, there was no one there, not a single trace of a body. No bones, no clothing, no personal items, just empty space humming with quiet energy. Over the next few weeks, teams entered all 7 ships. Each one was different on the inside. Some had spiral corridors that seemed to loop forever. Others had rooms that changed shape when you turned your back. But all shared one thing, total emptiness. It was as if the entire crew had simply vanished, not died, not fled, vanished. Like they'd stepped out of reality and left their home behind. People started calling the ships tombs. Not because they looked like graves, but because they felt like memorials. Quiet, reverent, full of absence. Back home, the world watched, confused and uneasy. At first, there was excitement. Maybe we'd finally learn their secrets. But as reports came in, that excitement turned to dread, because the more we learned, the less we understood. The crystals in the walls responded to human presence, glowing brighter when someone was near, dimming when alone. Some researchers swore they heard whispers when standing still for too long, though no recording ever caught it. Others said the air inside made them dream vividly of stars they'd never seen. Worst of all, the ship seemed to resist study. Cameras would glitch near certain walls. Data would corrupt overnight. One team in Antarctica lost an entire week's worth of notes. Every file, every photo, replaced by static or blank pages. It wasn't sabotage. It was as if the ships didn't want to be understood. Governments grew frustrated. Billions had been spent. Lives risked. And for what? Empty halls and glowing rocks? Some leaders demanded the ships be dismantled, studied piece by piece. But every attempt failed. Lasers bounced off. Drills slipped. Even basic samples refused to come loose. The material seemed to heal itself, closing any tiny scratch within seconds. Meanwhile, strange things began happening outside the ships too. Animals avoided the landing zones. Birds wouldn't fly over them. Crops planted nearby grew faster but tasted bland, like they'd lost their soul. Locals near the Amazon site reported feeling watched even when alone. Not in a scary way, more like remembered. Scientists argued endlessly. One camp believed the Draconians hadn't disappeared. They'd transformed. Maybe their biology allowed them to shift into another state of being, and Earth's environment triggered it. Another group thought the ships were alive and the crew had merged with them, becoming part of the structure. A quieter, more unsettling theory suggested they never existed in our dimension to begin with. That what we saw was just a shadow of their true form, and when they landed, they fully crossed over and left the shell behind. But no theory could explain why they chose Earth. Why these exact spots? Researchers noticed something odd. All 7 landing sites sat on ancient geological fault lines or magnetic anomalies, places where Earth's energy field bent in unusual ways. Some matched coordinates from prehistoric sites, places where early humans built temples or buried their dead. Coincidence? Or had the Draconians known about Earth long before we knew about them? As months passed, public interest faded. The news moved on. New crises took over headlines. But for the scientists living at the sites, time slowed down. They stopped seeing the ships as alien objects and started seeing them as companions. Silent, mysterious, but somehow kind. No one ever got hurt near them. In fact, some researchers said their chronic pain vanished while inside. Others claimed their thoughts felt clearer. Still, the big question hung over everything. What happened to the crew? One night during a full moon, a technician at the Tibetan site recorded something odd. For 3 seconds, the entire ship flickered, not like a glitch, but like a breath. And in that moment, the cameras caught a shadow moving inside. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape, tall and thin, walking down a corridor that hadn't been there before. Then it was gone. The footage was blurry, shaky, easily dismissed. But those who saw it couldn't forget it. Maybe the crew wasn't gone, maybe they were just waiting, or maybe they'd become something else entirely, and Earth, unknowingly, had become their sanctuary, or their prison. No one knew which was worse. Years passed. The world moved on, but Earth never really did. The Draconian ships stayed where they landed, silent, still, and strangely respected. Governments built fences around them not to keep people out, but to keep the mystery safe. Scientists came and went, replaced by younger ones who grew up knowing the ships as part of the landscape, like mountains or oceans. Kids in school learned about them in history class, right between the moon landing and the climate accords. But unlike those events, this one had no ending. No neat conclusion, just a giant glowing question mark sitting in 7 quiet places across the planet. Life adapted. Farmers near the Gobi site planted crops in wider circles, giving the ship space like it was an old temple. Tourists weren't allowed close, but they'd hike to the edge of the restricted zones just to feel the air. Cooler, calmer, somehow heavier. Pilots flying overhead reported their compasses spinning for a few seconds when passing directly above. Not dangerously, just oddly, like the ship was reminding them it was there. But the real change happened in science. Physics textbooks got rewritten, not because we understood the ships, but because we had to admit our old rules didn't apply. Concepts like solid matter or linear time started sounding more like suggestions than laws. Labs around the world began experimenting with energy fields inspired by the ship's hum, leading to breakthroughs in clean power and medical imaging. Nothing matched the originals, of course, but the mere attempt pushed humanity forward in ways no one expected. Still, the biggest mystery remained unsolved. What happened to the Draconians? Then came the discovery that shook everything. Deep space telescopes, upgraded and linked across continents, finally got a clear look at the Draco system, the place the Armada likely came from. And what they saw wasn't ruins. It wasn't even empty. It was gone. Not destroyed. Not abandoned. Gone. The star itself still burned, but the planets that once orbited it vanished. No debris, no dust clouds, just clean, empty space where entire worlds should have been. It was as if someone had reached into the universe and erased them like a pencil mark. That changed the tone of every conversation. This wasn't just a lost fleet. This was a civilization that had disappeared from existence, and their last act was coming to Earth. Panic didn't return, but a quiet dread settled in. Were we next? Had the Draconians fled something so terrible it could unmake planets, and had it followed them here? Or had Earth done something to them? Some scientists whispered a terrifying idea. Maybe the ships didn't crash or land. Maybe they surrendered. Maybe Earth's atmosphere, its magnetic field, even human consciousness itself acted like a trap for beings from another dimension. And the moment they touched our world, they unraveled. It sounded crazy, but then again, so did everything about the Armada. Governments held secret meetings, not about war this time, but about survival. Should we try to wake the ships? Should we build shields in case whatever erased Draco came looking? Or should we leave the ships alone and hope we weren't noticed? Meanwhile, the ships themselves began doing something new. They started pulsing. Not loudly, not visibly. But deep underground sensors picked it up. A slow, rhythmic vibration once every 7.83 seconds. That number meant something. It matched the Schumann resonance, the natural frequency of Earth's electromagnetic field. The same frequency, some say, matches the human brain in deep meditation. Coincidence? Or connection? People living near the sites reported strange dreams, visions of vast oceans under alien skies, of cities built from light, of a great silence spreading across the stars. No one could prove the dreams came from the ships, but too many people described the same images for it to be random. Then, a breakthrough, sort of. A young researcher, working alone at the Amazon site during a storm, noticed something no one else had. When lightning struck nearby, the ship's crystals flared brightly for a split second. Not randomly. In a pattern. She recorded it, ran it through translation software designed for cosmic signals, and got words, not English, not in a human language, but structured, meaningful. One phrase kept repeating, translated roughly as, "We are safe now." Safe from what? Safe how? No one knew. But the phrase spread like wildfire. It gave people hope. Maybe the Draconians hadn't been destroyed. Maybe they'd found refuge here, in a way we couldn't see or understand. Maybe Earth wasn't a tomb, maybe it was a sanctuary, but that hope came with a shadow. Because if Earth could hide an entire alien race from whatever wiped out their home, then Earth itself might be the only place in the galaxy that could do that. And if that was true, then we weren't just hosts. We were protectors, or maybe prisoners. No other alien signals came after that, not from nearby stars, not from distant galaxies. The universe, once thought to be buzzing with life, fell eerily quiet. As if every civilization out there had heard what happened to the Draconians and decided to stay hidden. Even our own space missions changed. Probes sent to Mars or Jupiter now carried extra shielding, extra silence. No loud broadcasts, no bright lights. Humanity learned to whisper into the dark, afraid someone or something might be listening. Back on Earth, the ships remained. Not as invaders, not as gods, just as reminders that the universe is stranger than we think. That help can look like silence. That sometimes the most powerful thing isn't to speak, but to disappear, so others might live. And as the years rolled on, people stopped asking, what happened to them? Instead, they started wondering, what did we do to deserve their trust? No one had an answer, but everyone felt the weight of the question. 20 years after the Draconian Armada fell silent on Earth, the world looks mostly the same, but feels completely different. Cities still bustle, phones still buzz, and coffee still gets spilled on morning commutes. But now, every child grows up knowing that just beyond the horizon in 7 quiet places sit the remains of a civilization that chose Earth as its final stop. Not to conquer, not to warn, but to vanish and trust us with their silence. The ships are no longer called alien vessels or mysterious objects. People just call them the tombs. Not because they're scary, but because they're sacred. Like ancient trees or mountain peaks, they've become part of Earth's soul. No one owns them. No country claims them. They belong to everyone and to no one. Tourists aren't allowed near them, but on clear nights, people gather at the edges of the exclusion zones just to sit and watch. Some bring instruments and play soft music. Others just breathe. There's a calm there that can't be explained, only felt. Scientists still study the tombs, but not like before. The frantic energy of the early years is gone. Now it's quieter, more patient. Researchers don't try to crack them open or force answers. They listen, they observe, they wait. And slowly, over decades, the tombs have begun to respond, not with words, but with patterns. The crystals inside glow in sync with solar flares. The hum deep within matches the rhythm of ocean tides. And every year, on the anniversary of their landing, all 7 ships pulse together in a single, soft wave of light, visible only to special cameras, but felt by anyone standing nearby as a warmth in the chest, like a memory you can't quite place. No one knows if it's a message, a heartbeat, or just the Earth and the ships finally learning each other's language. What's changed most isn't technology or politics, it's how people see themselves. Before the Armada, humanity thought it was alone, small, and maybe unimportant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. Now we know we're not alone, but more than that, we know we might be special. Because whatever happened to the Draconians, they came here, not to Mars, not to a lifeless moon, but to Earth with its messy oceans, its chaotic weather, its noisy, flawed, beautiful people. They chose us. And in their silence, they left behind a gift, the belief that our world has something rare, something worth protecting, something even advanced beings couldn't find anywhere else. Schools teach it now, not as science fiction, but as a lesson in humility and hope. Kids learn that strength isn't always about weapons or speed. Sometimes it's about offering shelter. Sometimes the bravest thing a civilization can do is disappear so another can survive. And Earth? Earth has changed too. Wars still happen, yes. Greed and fear haven't vanished. But something shifted in the global mind. The sight of those silent ships, so powerful yet so peaceful, made people rethink what power really means. Nations that once raced to build bigger bombs now compete to restore forests, clean oceans, and heal the climate. Not because they were forced to, but because they finally understood. Earth isn't just a rock we live on. It's a sanctuary. And maybe, just maybe, the last one in the galaxy. No other alien contact has happened since. Not a signal. Not a shadow in the sky. The stars remain quiet. Some say the universe is holding its breath, watching to see what we do with the trust the Draconians gave us. Others believe every other civilization saw what happened and decided Earth was too dangerous or too holy to approach. But the truth no one talks about, the one that lives in the quiet corners of late-night conversations, is this. Maybe the Draconians didn't just vanish into Earth, maybe they became part of it. Not in a spooky way, but in the way rain becomes part of the soil, or light becomes part of a leaf. Maybe their consciousness, their essence, merged with the planet's own living field. Its magnetic pulse, its forests, its oceans. That would explain why animals act calm near the tombs, why plants grow faster, why people feel peace there even when they're grieving. And if that's true, then the Draconians didn't die, they joined us. Now every time someone plants a tree, cleans a river, or chooses kindness over anger, they're not just helping Earth. They're honoring a promise made in silence 2 decades ago. The tombs still don't speak. They don't need to. Their presence is the message. A reminder that survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about being the kindest. That sometimes the greatest act of courage is to lay down your weapons, land gently on a stranger's world, and trust them to carry your story forward. And so, humanity walks a little softer now, looks at the sky with more wonder than fear, teaches its children to listen not just with ears, but with hearts, because the galaxy may never understand what happened to the Draconian Armada. But Earth does. We lived through it. We changed because of it. And every day, we try to be worthy of it. The ships sit. The world turns. And somewhere in the quiet hum between heartbeats and starlight, a question echoes. Not in words, but in how we choose to live. What will you do with the silence they left behind?